host, Brian Goulet of the Goulet Pen Company and InkNouveau.com. This is part 2 of my sampling ink topic in the Fountain Pen 101 series. The first topic of the sampling inks, I talk about different procedures and methods that you can use for actually doing your samples and getting an idea of your ink color. But this one I'm going to be talking about how to get the ink from the sample vials into your pens. So I got a couple of different things, some tips that I can show you that might make your sampling process a little bit more fun. So let's check it out. The way that you would typically fill the vial, fill your pen from a vial, in an ideal world would be uncap it, have it sitting on the desk or wherever. If you want to secure it or something, that's never a bad idea. But if all goes well, you take your pen, which would fit into the vial in an ideal fashion, and you can just leave it sitting right where it is as you fill it. You can get a full filling out of it and be on your merry way. Of course, we're not always working with an ideal situation. Filling with the vial straight up may not always be an option. Reason being, a lot of pens, actually just about all of them, will have a filler hole that's basically where the nib meets the grip section of the pen. You can see here's an Edison pen. That's where the filler hole is, right there. If that filler hole is not submersed in the ink, it's going to make it much harder, if not impossible, for the pen to actually fill. So when you run into that situation, you need to tilt the vial. By tilting the vial, you're going to submerge at least the part of the pen that is going to fill. So it requires a little bit of dexterity. You have to be careful not to dump ink all over your desk. So maybe put some, sheet of plastic or wax paper or something down if you're that worried about where you're filling. But if you tilt it enough, you can submerge the nib, at least the part that's going to fill, down into the ink itself. And by holding it kind of like this, you can then make sure that you are getting completely submersed, and you'll have much more success filling that way. When you're filling with a pen such as the Noodler's Konrad, this is one I've been asked about, the Konrad, the Ahab, the other Noodler's Flex pen. Sometimes when you're filling directly into it, even if it's a new fresh vial, you may be able to get some ink, but you're going to end up sucking up a lot of air just with the sample vial up and down. You can see here I didn't get anything just doing it that way. But tilting it will make all the difference in the world. Now sometimes if you have a pen like the Konrad or like the original Noodler's nib creeper, the nib will fit in there basically any direction you put it. With the Ahab, you have a certain way, because it's kind of an oval cut. You have a certain way that the nib and feed have to fit in there, so you're going to have kind of the same filling position every time, which is either going to be right under the feed or right above the nib. But with the Konrad, it may not necessarily be that way, so you may be able to fill it by tilting it with the nib pointed straight up and having the feed fully submersed in there. But you can see here, that's not entirely working for me. So not to get discouraged, if you try flipping it upside down, sometimes that will work. Or maybe rotating on its side. Really just kind of rotate the pen around, keeping some part of it fully submersed. And there you go. You can see here I got a full filling that way by having the pen upside down. So tilting it, usually having the feed submersed, will help to fill it. If that doesn't work though, try it in different positions with maybe the top of the nib submersed or maybe even the side. It's usually the top if it's not the bottom of the feed. But then that should help you out. If you have a cartridge converter pen, such as the Edison, you can pull the converter out and just fill the converter into the vial. But the vial is a little bit tall. So there's a couple options for you. You can either take the vial and kind of try to hold it and tilt it so that you can get the converter into the ink. It's not a pretty process, but it will work like so. Really, as long as you're getting the bottom of the converter down into the ink, it's getting the job done. But because you have to hold the part of the converter here while you untwist the mechanism, it can be a little cumbersome. So one kind of trick that you can do is just take a conventional number 2 pencil and kind of jam it down in there so that it's holding this top part of the converter. Now you've got the converter fully submersed down in there, the pencil is holding it in place, and you can simply unscrew the mechanism, guaranteeing yourself a full fill without having to do any kind of crazy tilting or anything like that. And then all you got to do is take it, put it onto the back of your pen, maybe force just a little bit of ink down in there. A super handy tool is an ink syringe, a blunt tip ink syringe, because that allows you to go down in there and you can get all the ink out of the vial, not have to risk getting your hands all inked up. And you can either pull out your converter or cartridge. You don't even have to have a converter if you have an ink syringe, and you can just refill directly into it. Then you just reinstall it and you're good to go. The ink syringe also works well if you have a piston fill pen. Now I've got a TWSBI 540 here. It's a clear demonstrator, so it'll help to easily show what I'm doing. Some pistons will allow you to either unscrew the nib unit out of the pen, or like this TWSBI, you can just unscrew the whole grip section right off the pen. And if you have the ink syringe, you can just fill directly into the piston body. Another method you can do is called the feed saturation if you have an ink syringe. I have a whole video on it, but the basic idea is that you just a couple of drops at a time fill up or saturate the feed and then draw it into the pen. Repeat this over and over again until the pen is filled. This method works really well if you have a piston pen that doesn't fit into the vial, you don't want to tilt it, or if it does not have a removable feed. Another handy use for the ink syringe is if you have a pen that's an eyedropper fill, such as some of the ones that come with the 4.5 ounce Noodler's bottles, or there's, if you eyedropper convert your pen, basically what you're doing is using the body to hold all the ink. So the syringe, you can just kind of bloop, take your sample, drop it in there, close your pen up, a little silicone grease never hurts, and you're good to go. And last but not least here, you have one of the simplest methods, which is if you have an eyedropper fill pen, or if you have a piston pen where you remove the nib, that's a similar situation, basically a large body of ink that you want to fill, you can take the sample and just dump it right into the pen. That's the simplest method of all. Of course, it takes a little bit of practice, a little bit of dexterity, and you always risk spilling some, but it definitely gets the job done. If you want to lessen the risk a little bit, one thing you can always do is to get a index card, like I have here, and you can kind of make your own funnel. If you happen to have a funnel that's small enough to fit into a pen like this, that can work. But if I just grab a piece of Scotch tape here, take the index card, kind of wrap it like so, just create a really small hole at the end of it. Voila, I've made myself a little funnel. And then all you got to do is take your sample, plop it in there, and it's filled. As always, if you have any questions, you can shoot me an email at brian@gouletpens.com. Thanks so much for watching, and right on. But there's lots of other uses for these anyway. Crap. Sampling inks topic. This topic is sampling ink video on fountain pen sample vials. Vials are something commonly used to house ink samples, and sometimes it may not be super intuitive about, or at least the result of what the heck am I trying to say here? And you're good to write. Maybe don't drip it on your desk like I just did, but I don't have a breather tube in here. Oh, daggone it. Of course, you don't want to drip it everywhere like I just did. Maybe I'll reshoot that. In order to get this filler hole submersed, fully submersed. It's not submersed, filler hole submersed. Filler hole is not submersed. Submersed, hole submersed. Submersed is submersed in the ink. Submerse the nib, fully submersed, completely submersed, fully submersed in there, This is a horrible example because you can't see it filling. I am not going to use this footage. This thing is going to be shot in so many segments, I have no idea how it's going to come all together. It'll come together okay.